Hello everyone and welcome to another Randomised Gaming video, and I will be your commentating host for this video, Random Gamer Riven. So in today's video we are going to take a look at and a playthrough of the normal course in Wave Race 64 Rumble Pack Edition. Yes, that's right, this is the Rumble Pack Edition, which was Japanese exclusive. And it is effectively the definitive version of Wave Race 64, as it featured a number of improvements both over the original Japanese version, incorporated the North American and European version changes, and then added some additional content on top of that. I should also state that this version was actually originally sponsored by Kawasaki jet skis, and there was also Fanta adverts included in the game as well that you'll see on one of the stages later on. So what exactly did Wave Racer 64 change? Well, I'm not entirely sure myself, but I had a gander around the internet, and although I don't believe every change is documented, there are a few interesting things. First off, the narrator's voice was adjusted from the Japanese original to the Western version. A number of new voice calls were also added and improved. Another thing that's changed is the first song used on the Sandy Beach, I think it is, the first track in normal was completely remixed and sounds much better. Same with the last track in the normal campaign, that was also remixed. There was also some audio adjustments here and there, I believe, as well. Basically, it's clear, I think Nintendo weren't happy with Wave Race 64 original audio and tried to improve it as much as they could for this version. So this version really is the best version to buy if you're a fan of the game. It also added in a very nice ghost mode in time attack. So effectively, when you started doing well, you would get a dolphin ghost that you could follow around the tracks. That was basically your best time. So I'll let you listen to the remix music when we get to the first race, but in the meantime, as I'm just going to do some course practicing my jumps, etc., and crashing as we go around to Dolphin Island. So this is like the first training course before you actually start the championship. And you can skip this course, but I'm just going to do a bit of, it's actually Dolphin Park, I should say. Some jet skiing around Dolphin Park, and this is the first area in the game. And it's actually, I mean, as an N64 game, Wave Race 64 was certainly one of the most impressive of the early launch games. In fact, it's fair to say I think Wave Race 64 is actually graphically a better looking game than both Mario Kart 64 and F-Zero X. In fact, when you look at F-Zero X and Mario Kart in comparison to this looks an awful lot better. Now, this does have some issues, notably the N64 really wasn't a powerhouse of a console when it came to frame rate, and this is running at, from what I could see, doing some tests, 20 frames a second, which is pretty disappointing. That said, it's done in a way that it's hard to notice that it's running in 20 frames a second, but still, it's fairly underpowered. But visually, this is certainly the most impressive of the early races on the N64. Indeed, I think this arguably, you could say this is perhaps one of the best races on the N64 as well. There's some great weather effects as well here seen in some of the stages, such as the lake stage where it starts off misty and then the sun slowly comes up and the mist slowly disappears. There's nighttime, you've got daytime racing as well. So all in all, it's a very, very well put together title, and I think this is certainly one of the better ones. This is one of those games I never really played that much on the 64 originally, but having played it relatively recently, I actually really appreciate this more, and I probably enjoy this more now than I do Mario Kart, despite playing Mario Kart 64 an awful lot when I was younger, and F-Zero X. I think this is probably the best of those races on the N64. I think Nintendo always did struggle a bit with their racing games, but I certainly think this was the best one. Okay, I'm not going to say too much. I'll let you listen to the remix tune for this stage.
Get ready for the first race. 3, Okay. Nice. Wow. You left everybody behind. Okay. Maximum power. Keep the pace. About 4 seconds ahead.
So as you heard, that's the remixed announcer and the remixed music as well, which I actually think definitely sounds better than the original song used in the Western version and the original Japanese version. I found that when I was listening to that track to be very, very sharp at points, and I can see why it was remixed. I think this version sounds much better. In fact, it's fair to say I suspect the composer probably wasn't that happy with the original songs. Probably one of the reasons why it was changed. And now the Wave Racer... So the Wave Race series, there's actually 3 games in it. There was the original Game Boy one, there was this one, and there was also the GameCube one. And I have to admit, this is probably one series where I think the 64 version was probably the best version. No, some people like the GameCube one. I just never got on with it that well. I think I kind of preferred this one actually. The Game Boy one's quite a nice little novelty from, I think it was 92 it was originally released, but it doesn't... It's basically like a top-down racer. It's nowhere near as good as this one. As it's fair to say, racing games weren't really the Game Boy's forte. So I'll probably chat a bit about the design about Wave Race 64, although I'm not hugely familiar with it. One thing I did notice playing a lot of these tracks is they are actually very short in this, and there's certainly very quick fire races, even shorter than say Mario Kart 64 and F-Zero. These races do feel very, very short, so everything feels quite adrenaline packed as a result. Now, it's actually impressive to see the water here. It's actually really well done, because certainly the N64, the Saturn and the PlayStation really weren't consoles that could replicate water that well, but Nintendo actually do a really good job of replicating how water works in this one. The textures work really well. It gives that impression of you going up and down. You can dive, as you see there in the jump, so you can go up and down. You do get the impression that you're going above and below the surface of the water, and it does feel like there is friction there as well if you move the wrong way in the water. So I think it's very cleverly done. Again, certain stages have much more sort of rippling effects, and you feel some of them you're battling against tidal waves, and it is actually very impressive to see this on the N64, which wasn't that kind of powerful console. I mean, at the time it was powerful. Of course, it was the most powerfulest console of the 32-bit era, which is effectively the late 90s. But as consoles actually go, it's not really that powerful, because of course this was released over 20 years ago now. And yes, when I say that, I do feel old.
You finished first and got 7 points. Great race. Move on to the
So there are a variety of modes in Wave Race 64, as was the course back then. I mean, this is the one thing I don't like about some of the modern games. Some of them have been very cheap on the modes with the additional content. In this you have the championship, you have a time attack, you have a 2-player verse mode, You have all the options to save. You could even transfer your saving with the control pack as well to your friend's N64. So there was quite a lot of extras play, and there was a fair few amount of secrets to unlock as well in this. So there were additional tracks on the harder difficulty. So you of course had to go up each difficulty to unlock the different tracks. And there was even the ability to play as the dolphin. I think it's pretty much finished everything, including the reverse courses. These days, however, additional content is being basically cut out of games and being sold back to users, which I really dislike. But this stage, now I should actually comment on this stage that's going on here. This is the lake stage. This is a really, really fantastically done stage. Kudos to the environmental and weather coders in this one, because it starts off misty as you're seeing in this first lap, and as the day goes on, or the race goes on, the mist starts to subside. You see we've got the birds coming up as well. So visually this is actually a really, really impressive race. It's using a lot of effects, and in comparison, a lot of other games, even later games like PS2, you wouldn't have seen these type of effects in the race in those type of games. And it's interesting to see you saw some developers really go out and push the boat with their games, certainly like Nintendo did with this, whereas other games that didn't quite. Even when you look at Mario Kart and F-Zero, they don't have the type of environmental effects and sort of weather effects that you see in Wave Race 64, and it does make you feel that the team who did Wave Race 64 really wanted to push the boat out to show off the best of the N64, and the Mario Kart team and the F-Zero X team didn't. So you see there, it's now sort of almost daylight now, and it's actually really nice. Again, the birds flying around the stage is a really well put together stage. I have to admit, I really like that race course. A couple of stages coming up actually are probably my least favourite ones, as one of them is almost like you've got like constant brick walls, so you're doing a lot of sharp turns. That I don't like, but the water and sort of weather effects in this lake stage are absolutely superb.
You finished first and got 7
And in case you're wondering, yes, I did manage to win every race first. Again, this is only on normal though, and I did make a few boo-boos in this, you'll see. In fact, this is actually my second run, because I played it the other day to get a dry run to practice on this, and that one I think I won. I still won it overall, but I didn't win every race, and this time I did actually go around and win every race, albeit a bit narrowly in one or two cases. So this is the 4th stage. This is probably one of my least favourite ones. I mean, I like the shadowy clouds and the weather. I just don't like the fact it looks like you've just got a huge brick wall to the side of you the whole time. You're supposed to go around that wall as well, but every time I manage to jump it or get close to jump it. Now, one of the other mechanics that you've not really seen me talk about or even do, but I'm just doing it there because I wasn't doing particularly well at the start of this race, is that you can miss 4 buoys, and if you miss a fifth one, it is race over. So basically you have to hit 4 buoys, and as you see there, I failed to basically missed 2 buoys. So I got 2 crosses, and I also smashed into the wall spectacularly there and there again, which wasn't so good. But yeah, basically you can miss up to 4 buoys and still carry on racing. Miss a 5th buoy, which is basically the left-right things you've got to, and it's race over. However, missing a buoy, as you see there, you've got max power, that's your racing speed. If you miss a buoy, your racing speed resets, and then you've got to go past the buoys in the correct way in order to get your speed back up again. So that's actually quite a nice mechanic, and it's certainly it rewards players for sticking to the racing line and not taking weird and wonderful shortcuts, because you do lose out on your speed. But again, this stage feels like you're in much rougher weather conditions, so it does feel a lot more jumpy. The waves do feel higher as well, partly just due to the sort of stormy weather cloud, but it feels like the water as well. And that is, as I said earlier, very well done. The weather effects I do think are really well, and how the water reacts as well on the different stages. It does mean that it doesn't feel like you've got a nice calm race this time around. It feels like you're in the middle of a storm and that you're trying to race just before it all comes in. But this is not my favourite stage due to the number of like sheer turns you have in it.
Oh! You did it! first and got 7 points. Great race. Move on to the next round.
Now we do actually have the Rumble Pack version of Mario 64 here at Randomised Gaming as well. That doesn't have as many changes, primarily just adds in Rumble, and I think mainly fixes a few glitches. I think there were 1 or 2 Easter eggs added, but not a huge amount from what I've seen. Pretty much it adds in the Western voice acting and audio effects again, because the original Japanese version was actually very rusted and was missing a number of effects that were later added in for the Western and European releases, and subsequently the N64 Japanese Rumble Edition fixed them and added them back in. One interesting one is there wasn't, as far as I'm aware, I don't believe Pilot Wing supported the Rumble Pack, and that would probably been the one game I'd like to have seen a Rumble Pack version but didn't get one. I don't know how well these sold, so I have a feeling they perhaps didn't sell that well, so if there were any further Rumble Pack editions planned, they were likely cancelled. The N64 itself struggled quite badly in Japan. A few of its games sold very well, a lot of its games didn't sell well. The console was actually quite unpopular, and the Saturn overall was actually a more popular console, although software sales wise they were quite similar when I've actually looked at legacy sales, primarily because Nintendo had a couple of games that did 3-4 million units, whereas the Sega Saturn only had, like, I think it was 3 games that actually did 1 million units. Had lots of games that sold reasonably well, close to 100, close to 1 million, but didn't actually have that many million sellers, whereas the N64 had quite a few million sellers and above. But overall the N64 had a very small library in comparison to the Sega Saturn. This is a bit of a dull stage. Again, it feels like I think you're actually looks almost like you're racing inside the fort this time around. I mean, it's novel racing in the tunnels, that feels quite good, but it does feel a little bit, just a bit bland. I suppose you've got the ships as well. I think it's supposed to be like you're racing in between ships in sort of the harbour area, yeah, because that looks like a big sort of tanker there to the right.
You did it!
But nice to see things like the chopper to the left there just flying along. Certainly they went for the sort of Daytona and Sega Sega Rally sort of environmental things with sort of all the interaction going on, which is what I really like to see in racing games, having interactive environment and things going on, much like a real race. Whereas I think some of the serious races are just concentrate so much on just the cars that the actual environments are very much second in nature and are just quite bland racetracks, and they don't have anything else going on, which is a real shame. So here we go with the final round. I'm also not going to say a huge amount now, as this is the other track that actually had remixed music, so I'll let you listen to it as well. This again I think does sound better.
Is the final round. Good luck. 3, 2, 1, go! Nice! Maximum power! Look, everybody is behind you! No big deal. Okay. Watch out! Good! You moved up! You're about 3 seconds behind! Up 1 place!
So there you have it. That was the
and got 7 points.
Wave Race 64 Rumble Pack Edition. And I must admit, if you do have an N64, if you don't have Wave Race, or if you've only got, say, the PAL version and you've just got an NTSC version, I would highly recommend it. If you've got the US version, probably not so much reason to pick up the Japanese Rumble Pack Edition, but if you're just starting out collecting an N64, then this is definitely the version of Wave Race to go for. The only downside is the menus are in Japanese, but I saw there's a few websites that do list the menus so you can figure them out. There are some notable audio changes that do make this, and even the additional time attack features that do make this, as I said, the definitive version, probably the version to go for.
You're the champion! Congratulations!
It's just a shame that Nintendo didn't translate the game into English for the later Virtual Console release. It seems a real shame, as this is the definitive version of the game.
You get to move up to the next class!
Yeah, that's all I'm going to say for this. I think as a game, Wave Race 64 is actually really enjoyable. It does look one of the best N64 games, and it's a solid racer, even for a game that only runs at 20 frames a second. So, all that leaves me to say is, of course, I have been your host, Random Gamer Riven, and this has been Randomised Gaming. Thank you for watching, and as always, if you like this video, please do hit that like button, and if you enjoy our content, please do subscribe to the channel.